Hi everyone, we're here at DIA and Ken and I are excited to talk about a presentation we did yesterday at the Innovation Theater about the R&D Accelerator. My name is Pamela Tenaerts, I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Medable.
And I'm Ken Getz, and I'm the Executive Director at the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development.
And we're here today to do a recap of the presentation we did yesterday. And what we talked about was really getting at a first set of metrics about DCT adoption. And the first set of metrics we worked on was on the return on investment of spending on technologies related to decentralized clinical trial. I've been at Medable about a year and a half, and when I came to Medable, I was really excited to learn that we had contracted with Ken Getz and the Center for Study of Drug Development to work on the ENPV measure in clinical trials. I'd had some experience in working on ENPV with patient engagement and really learned a lot about this measure as a way to sort of make business decisions in R&D development on how to set up clinical trials. Ken, you want to tell us a little bit more about how ENPV really works?
Yes, it's a very common measure that's used by portfolio planners, by finance-oriented functions, and also by senior leaders. It's a very important measure that they use to really evaluate investments and whether they provide a sufficient return to justify that investment moving forward. So we really applied that measure. It's a financial measure, and it looks at cash flows, both the outflows that relate to investments and expenses, as well as the inflows, the downstream revenue that's generated in order to create essentially a product life cycle and a value life cycle for a given drug development program.
And what we did was we really hit it at the right moment in time, where at Medable we had just finished a fair amount of conversions to DCTs during the pandemic. So we had a lot of contract data we could submit to Ken to use as inputs into this model. And I think that's one of the unusual features, is that this was actually based on actual data. A lot of models for ENPV are based on assumption. So that we were able to give phase 2 mean contract value for a series of studies that we had done, and then also phase 3 mean contract value for studies we had done. And Ken, I think you had some data from before that had protocol performance in it.
Right, and as Pam mentioned, often we see ENPV models that are based purely on anecdotal information or just assumptions without any data. And this was great timing because we had protocol performance data, as Pam mentioned, where we had a subset of protocols for which we knew some DCT solutions had been used to support the execution of the clinical trial. And we could compare those against another set of protocols for which no virtual or remote support had been used. So this was really a nice way for us to understand the impact of DCT deployments in clinical trials and compare performance. And we learned through those comparisons that in fact the DCT supported protocols generated or yielded faster cycle times, not only at the study initiation phase or during the study closeout phase, but if you look at the full duration of the clinical trial. When we dug deeper, we found that some of the partial explanation for this speed advantage or the speed improvement in the DCT supported trials was associated with recruitment and retention improvements, as well as a reduction in the number of protocol amendments. So we had a very good feel for some of the assumptions that we could make based on real data or actual data to populate the model. And then, as Pam mentioned, we had contracts, nearly 60 individual contracts, phase 2 and phase 3 DCT deployments that we could apply to the model for the investment or the expense components of the modeling effort. This is only a first model, though, and we're very excited that we've been able to build the model and begin populating it, but our hope is that we're going to be able to continue to populate it and get even more granular and valuable insights.
And I think at very high level, what you found is that in a phase 2 development cycle, and that usually takes about 4 trials, the contract value of a DCT technology was about 1.9 million, and the return on investment was 5 times that amount. So that equates to about, it's not quite 10 million, but close to 10 million. In phase 3, because the trials are bigger, the contract value was a little bit more, and you only need 3 trials in phase 3. And so that total contract value for the whole phase would be about $3 million, but at a 13-time rate of return, that really garners you about 39 million. And Ken, you're exactly right that this is just the first broad stroke in many ways at looking at this data. And our goal is to delve deeper and find systematic ways to collect more data so we can look at it in different ways, maybe disease areas, which elements of DCTs perform better than others, and maybe some other things that.
That's right. I mean, this very first study, we looked at a broad grouping of DCT solutions, but our hope long-term will be to look at individual solutions and what impact they may have by specific disease subgroup, by phase, and there'll be many other factors. We're not measuring all of the impact drivers either. We know and suspect that virtual and remote solutions will provide more automation, will assist in faster data collection, will improve patient access to trials, might improve dose adherence in studies. So there are lots of things that we have yet to incorporate that may even demonstrate a larger multiple on the investment that is made. But as Pam noted, the model really maps out a variety of different scenarios. So even just looking at a small 10% improvement in a phase 3 study, based on the investment required, you're getting you can get up to a 13 times multiple on that investment, and that's a huge ROI for any investment that's made.
And I think one of the other elements to consider is that financial return on investment is obviously valuable and good, but we also need to think about the patient experience in these trials and how that might be improved, because now they don't have to trek out to a research site that might be an hour, in a good scenario, maybe 2-3 hours away when you live further away. So we're also hoping to collect more data about the experience, both from the patient perspective and the site perspective, and on elements such as diversity, because as you make trials easier for people to participate in, hopefully we can now start reaching the people that actually represent people living with the disease, and not just the ones that are able to participate because they have the time or the ability to do so.
I'm reminded of the woman who spoke at the end of our session yesterday, yes. A patient who'd been in a trial that provided virtual and remote support.
I think she even said it was a Medable trial, so we didn't know.
But it just really hit home the point that, yes, we're measuring net financial impact, but there are so many perhaps more important intangible value creation. And this particular person had really benefited by a trial that offered her convenience. If that had not been offered, she may never have had access to that trial to begin with.
And I think that might be the right place to end, is that as an industry, we really have the responsibility to provide the data to actually show the promise that we always say DCTs will bring. And I think that will then also accelerate adoption, and the right adoption, the responsible adoption, and maybe thereby giving us a pathway to having more evidence for all these other diseases that we don't quite have evidence for.
What a perfect message to end.